Well. Let's hope I don't screw it up this week. Welcome everyone. It's Blender today live once again, live from Amsterdam. It's 9 p.m., 5 past 9. It's been a very interesting week. There were no removals so far, at least that I know, but there has been additions, big additions and changes in the way the Blender, in the way of Blender itself, the workflow, the tools, the toolbar. So a lot of UI changes, but also a lot of actual interaction with the tools. There's been a lot of alarms going, thinking that, oh no, now it's too slow because it's supposed to be for beginners. And want to make that clear that it's not that way. It's not meant to slow down anyone. Actually, it's the other way around. It's gonna make it easier for beginners, but it's also gonna make it better for everyone, including people that even make add-ons or their own tools. It's gonna be good for everyone. So let's trust the workflow. The way this works, if this is the first time that you're checking out this live stream, it happens every week. We get together, we compile Blender, the latest and greatest, and we just test stuff. That's why it's called Blender Today, because I just compiled Blender today now, actually 5 minutes ago. So we want to see the latest stuff. Towards the end of the program, whatever this is called, I'm going to be answering questions. So make sure you leave them in the chat. There is, you can add Blender Today, and then they will highlight better so I can read them afterwards. I'm gonna quickly check that everything is fine. Please assure me that everything is fine. That didn't screw up. Last week I by mistake I started the live stream on Twitch. I'm also live streaming on Twitch and on the YouTube, but in case I screw up things, okay, now we seem to be fine in both. All right, greetings from Sevilla. Wow. What else? There were people in the Dolomites in Italy. That's so cool. Brazil. Awesome. Well. Let's get to it. Ciao, Massimo. Suriname. Wow, this is so international. There's over 200 people live. So there is over 200 people waiting for this. Waiting for what? Waiting for Blender 2.8 and what's all this crazy hype going on around it. It's funny though, because this blog post, well, actually the actual release of these icons and the tool and everything, is gathering a lot of attention, but actually the workflow of selecting a tool, having an active tool concept, that actually has been for months. It's been there for like a while now, but nobody really cared about it because it didn't have icons. Now that there are icons, people are going nuts about it. So let's talk about it. What is it? It's a blog post that it's actually the blog post came out because of some screenshots that were around. Of course, Blender is developed online. It's developed very transparently. Everything that you make, everything that they commit, every change in the code in Blender gets pushed immediately. And the same, like if a developer, we're working together with a developer, for example, and we just ask for a change. Usually they just put it in the main branch for like to see it. But yeah, that branch goes to everyone. It's not like something internal and then it goes out to the world. Actually, everything that we make, it's one-on-one public for everyone. So that has its advantages because yes, you get to see everything as is developed, but it also has its drawbacks because some things are really work in progress. They're like a test or like a there's just progress, right? You know, you can't make the perfect tool just at once. You go through it and you make it better over time. So let's see what the whole deal is about. Why even having a live stream and not just reading about the blog? Let's actually go and well, I already compiled Blender. I actually compiled 2 branches, and I'm gonna run this one. Before running it, I just want to quickly highlight the goals, because it is important. You have to think about the goals. This is not just making something new because. There are many things that are there are new concepts in Blender. This concept of an active tool, but also there are a few things that is just common sense. Like we want consistency about Blender modes. Yeah, something we don't have yet. By the way, cheers. It's over 9 p.m. here, so I'm allowed. It's an IPA. Then. So some of it is consistency. We want to have consistency on the tools. Every tool should work the same depending in each mode. There are some, for example, when you're painting, basically the tool of painting is a brush, a size, a radius, a strength, and you paint. And sometimes that concept, even though it's the same in vertex paint or texture paint or even weight paint or even sculpt, because it's all a brush, they have different names in different modes. They have different UI, different interface, different presets. So all of that is not really following, not very consistent across modes. So one of those things is we want to solve that. Then we want to allow for manipulator widgets. So instead of having also all the buttons on the side, we would like to have more, I think it's the future, to have more tools in the viewport itself. So you have to stop looking through all the tools and everything, but actually having them on a in your actual model, right? So maybe you can select the tool, but you should act in the model itself. You shouldn't like select tool, have a pop-up, fill in a form, and then enter and then see what happens. That's how they used to animate 20 years ago. It's not how it should be. Then I just would like to be better, blah blah, use Blender in a more visual way, not only via shortcuts, but this is the most important part, is that we're committed to keeping Blender's efficient keyboard focused workflow. We are using Blender every day, all day. There is a movie going on, Spring project, which is going to switch to Blender 2.8 soon, in just a matter of weeks, 3 weeks. So it's gonna be used and tested, and not only here but everywhere in the world is being used. So we have feedback from, we read the feedback, so it's not gonna affect more advanced users. So let's see what's the fuss is about. This is Blender 2.8 compiled just now. So what is different about this thing? The difference is, let's make it there, let's fit it in there. So the difference is the toolbar. So in Blender 249, 17, well, in 249 to 79, no. Blender 279, we have this toolbar. It's a mix of things. There is history, for example, which is, it's not a tool really, right? The repeat last is a sort of a tool, but it's not really a tool. Then you have a mix of editing tools, but also transformation tools. There is the data transfer tools, which are more specific. You don't use them every day, such as you use delete, right? So there's many levels of all tools usage there. There's also tabs that are used and even abused in 279. There's a few too many things here. Some of them make sense. It doesn't make sense that the icon is on the left, but also the text is centered. Really doesn't make that much sense. If you want to, like, you can communicate that it's a cone with the icon should be enough. So there is really no need to have a giant toolbar here, for example, right? Even the text doesn't always fit. There is many tabs that are not always in use. Well, rigid body tools, not there anymore. Groups. There are many things that even add-ons have their own tabs. So this, and the most problematic part was here below, is the last operator settings, which sometimes gets lost. It's I was showing the wrong icon. There you go. So for example, this last operator, it's showing here. It's showing options that I just moved something. I moved it. And it's showing like edit grease pencil, edit texture space, these things that they don't, I mean, if you want to edit the texture space, you're not going to move it and then decide that you want to edit the texture space. So that's very weird. You could maybe, but for that you have texture space tools. So text space tools, but it's just not the most, this is all built in on the fly. So that's why sometimes it's not very efficient. That's why there is constrained access in 3 different fields instead of being 1. It is all automatic. That's why it's not always more the most efficient use of space. So in 2.8, enter the toolbar, the new toolbar. So this is a work in progress. This toolbar by default right now is like huge. It's much bigger than it would be. So let's see if I make it home. This is the default size. It's much bigger than it will be for the time being. The icons are huge, but it can be scaled, of course, like the rest of Blender. You can do it with minus and plus, or you can also control middle mouse to go around. Then besides that, it also has 2 special snap points. One is snapping to be 2 columns, and the other one is snapping to be 1 column. So you can have it very thin there, and then you can activate the manipulators to go around. And this I compiled just now, yes. So I think at a glance, this maybe they could have some tweaks, especially these icons are a bit weird. This one looks like a rocket, this one like a ring, and this one like a hammer. It's very weird. Maybe these have to be revisited. But what a lot of people miss the point is that a lot of the work that is being done here, it's not only about having pretty icons, but it's having icons at all. These icons are actually meshes. They're very low poly, completely optimized meshes for the time being. They are rendered as a mesh here. This is Blender mesh with vertex paint. They can be baked, they can be cached, they can become converted to images on load the first time you load Blender and maybe save. They're about optimizations that can happen afterwards, but for the time being, the concept of an active tool is that you can have a tool on your left mouse and change and use it at any time, basically. So by default, a lot of people might be annoyed that you left click and all you do is setting the 3D cursor around, right? Maybe if you are like anyone else, you will probably hate it the first time you open Blender and you've been moving this cursor around and you couldn't stop it. Well, you can now assign this action to any tool in Blender, any tool that is on the toolbar for the time being. So for example, select, box select. If you have many objects, you can just set the active tool as the box select, and then you can just select. So this is probably like 90% of the people are gonna set it up because it's more regular, right? It's like regular Blender. You can hold the tool there and then select different kinds of selections, for example. This one is circle select, which is pretty neat because right now circle selection, actually in Blender 2.7, if you want to circle select, you press C for select and then you can draw the selection basically, but you can't rotate. You can't middle mouse, you can't rotate, it's just static in that view. That's very limiting. In Blender 2.8, you can actually just set the circle selection as your active tool, and then you can just select, rotate the view, select a bit more, and then rotate again and select again. This is something that you could not do in Blender 2.7, so that's a great feature. Then it's also lasso select, of course. There are many tools right there, but probably the ones that got more of the attention are the ones that have more icons and more colorful icons. In this case, are the ones for mesh editing. So let's add a monkey, of course, always. and then in edit mode you'll have this selection of tools. Am I missing something? I've been talking forever. Okay. Yes. Okay, cool. Just questions that I'm gonna reply after I demo this. Some of the tools you already know. Extrusion, for example, extrude tools, extrude individual, or extrude to cursor. That one I haven't seen. Extrude individual is the one that extrudes individual faces. So if you have multiple faces, then you can just extrude individual. And the way you would do it, if you had like in the regular workflow, I would do it with Alt E and then individual faces, and then just keep working like that. So that's how I would do it in Blender 2.0, and probably how I would do it anyway in Blender 2.8. It's just Alt E for me is faster, right? Alt E and then select and then just extrude. The way you would do it in using the active tools would be to set that active tool, extrude individual, as active, and then you select, and every time you press click, left click and drag, you're gonna be using that active tool. So for example, if you're using something that you use more often and repeat, for example, inset faces, you can say, okay, select this, then inset, select here, and then with one hand, look, man, no hands, well, just one hand, you can be moving around and insetting and reusing the same tool. The same, for example, if you're using bevel, it's also very, very useful. You can just click drag. Click drag. Yeah, bevel, I think it needs secondary click, so you can click and then you have to click again. Maybe that needs to be worked on, because the other tools like inset faces, just click, drag and release. Click, drag, release. While bevel has click, drag, and then you have to accept again. So also remember that these tools are going to have, ideally at some point they're going to have manipulators. So you select the tool and now you have to guess exactly where to click and drag, but in the future, under the hood of this active tool system is that you can use it afterwards in the 3D view. So you can do it in the actual model without actually having to guess where your mouse is going to be and everything. So this is just the beginning for something much bigger. And then of course for these tools you also have the one row, 2 rows, or the full UI. The cool thing about having it on a toolbar here on the side is that if you enable region overlap, which is the option in the user preferences, maybe you're going to change the name, but it's the one that makes it transparent. And if you in your theme change that 3D view region background to be actually transparent, then you suddenly have floating buttons. Let's use something a bit more light here. Eek. Yeah, because my top bar colors are not set. So if I go to the top bar, 3D view, where's my header? Here, header, top bar. I'm gonna quickly set the colors, and then the 3D view, I'm gonna set the background of the region background as transparent. Then you have floating buttons, which is very handy. And let's see where the buttons themselves, they're in the user interface. Toolbar item, wow, they even have their own theming option now. There you go. So now this is in white. So now you can see the shadow on the buttons, on the icons. So now you have basically floating buttons in the Blender UI. And of course, this is still a region, so you can control middle click to make it smaller, and then you end up with a very non-intrusive way of dealing with this kind of UI. I think I'm not setting up the color of the toolbar item selected, so I'm gonna make it, there you go. So now when I change it, so this is all completely work in progress. There is a lot of talk going on. Like, let's see, this is the blog post and it has 143 comments. Of course, many of them are just answers to the same by Willem or by Campbell, the developer and the designer that are working on it. But the discussion is pretty extensive. You're welcome to leave your feedback there. We always listen to feedback. Of course, this is not just a decision being made. This is an evolving change in the way of dealing with Blender itself, with the new tool system. So I think it's really powerful. It's in a way is easier for beginners because they understand. They can just click on a tool and use it. Click and use it is more, you know, you evolve with it. But for advanced user, I think it's also pretty useful because add-ons can have their own tabs, for example. I think it would be nice for replace the tabs maybe with a drop-down menu up here so you can choose where you want to be. The drop-down menus, you know, you can do control scroll, and you can scroll through the options. If you do hold control and then scroll, you can go through the options. So that way you could change the options that you see, the active tools that you see there much more easily. This work is going to be done for all the modes. So for example, this is the sculpt mode at the moment. This is what has been done so far. So this, I guess, is grab. Yes. And then let's see, I want to disable symmetry, so I just click on symmetry and then I disable mirror. So what you see here is also a new concept that is called popovers, and they're pretty popular in other on websites, on other applications, everywhere. A popover, it's basically, it's not a pop-up, it's not like something blocking that you have to do something about it, but it's more like a floating panel-ish. It's not a floating panel like in 2.4, but it's something similar. You can have basically anything in a very quick way to access. So I think this will help make some of the options more discoverable. This is, what is this, for example? This is a mask. Yeah, it's not very descriptive. But this one is like smooth, I think, probably. Would be nice to show the name of the brush or the tool itself that you're using. I now think it's not displayed anywhere. It's just, yeah, maybe you could say it on the when you mouse over, it could have like a little insta tip, which is like a tooltip, but it's instantaneous. You don't have to wait for it. I think that will be nice. You might have noticed too that the scroll bars now, they're slightly thinner. I think it's much more it's better. They don't need to be that big like in 2.4, 2.7. If you see the scroll bar here, like, it's huge, and in 2.5 it became slightly slimmer. Then, for example, another difference here, now that we have two Blender 2.8 here in the back and 2.7 here, you can see that the division between the editors is much more clear now, and it's rounded. So in the corner, so you know what belongs to each. I think that's also pretty nice. Let's continue. This is 2.7. Let's continue here. So, top bar. The top bar, this is what you see up here. This is this contains most of the most used settings. The radius, the strength, for example, that's something is pretty common that when you're using your tool, you use it all the time. But this is not always going to be there. A lot of people are concerned about the usage, but you can just collapse it. Like you could even have like a shortcut maybe to expand, or like when you make it full screen, you can also like expand it maybe. But ideally you wouldn't have to, because all the extra space that you gain by having the tools here is probably not something you want to hide all the time. Then this is also going to be cleaned up. Right now, this is basically just dumping all the panels there, just like putting them in the this new popover concept. But ideally, this will be cleaned up. So when maybe you don't have so many options, but they are more grouped into better categories. Right now, it's just on one-on-one what it was possible before into this new system. Then I think for vertex paint is being worked. No, this hasn't been committed yet, but like being able to choose the color here, it makes so much sense, right? So you can just, where am I? I'm setting the solid. There you go. So I'm painting red. That's very nice. And then you can just change the colors. And it all makes sense because it's right here. You don't have to dig through in 2.7. You have to dig. It's like the color is here. But for example, if you're using blur preset, blur has a color. Why? Then you go to draw and it's a different color than the one in blur. This was shown by William today, and yes, it doesn't make any sense. But the problem here is that the blur is not a brush, it's a preset in Blender 2.7. So the preset saves everything, saves even the color that you're using. So this is, I think it's confusing. Blur is not a blend mode really. It's a blend mode is multiply or mix or add, but not blur. Blur is a tool by itself. It's like cloning. You're not like, it's a different tool altogether. So that also makes much more sense, and it will make more sense when we have the icons right here. Then weight paint, oh, it's not here yet, but I've seen them. They're work in progress. They're pretty nice. Texture paint still not there, but all the modes are gonna become much better, I think. This is all super work in progress, so don't start going crazy about like it's gonna change your workflow or anything. This is an ongoing process. It's only been like a week, 2 weeks maybe since this feature was on. 1 week, I think. There are already videos on YouTube about, yeah, I haven't seen them, but I heard there is a lot going on in there. I think I'm in half an hour already of yes. So let's move into the, I could talk a little bit about the new workbench engine. I could talk a little bit about it. Let's I'm gonna make this smaller, just doesn't get on the way. Now I'm gonna save it to just to ask reply some questions, otherwise I get all the questions at the end and then I don't reply them because I ran out of time. So let's go all the way up. Jesus, oh wow. Okay, here's when I already were asking. All right, let's see. Today is May 1st. Yay. Why yay? Because we're closer to the 2.8. Haha. Let's see. Here's people are starting to see it. Everything is great. Thank you, Nadaniala, because it's nice to know that everything is right. Virginia, US. Scotland. One thing I missed was stuff like being able to change mesh shading from flat to smooth easily without heading to the menus. What do you mean? Like this, like shade smooth and shade flat. This is what you mean, I think. Well, this is another thing that I wasn't really a big fan of it being in the toolbar. because it is a tool, but it's also, I think even there's add-ons that change it as a, I think there is an add-on, the pie menu add-on, that I think so, yes, that they change between flat and smooth. Like, it's not a visualization mode, you're actually changing your mesh. Doesn't make sense. It's not shading. It's like, it is shading, but you're actually, it's not like wireframe and solid. You're actually changing your mesh. So careful with that. And I'm gonna disable. I still don't use pie menus that much. There you go. Next. Hello from Tunisia. Will Julian's B widget be implemented in 2.8, allowing CSS themes? Well, let's ask Julian. Are you there? Hello from Lithuania, Romania, Crimea. All right, the icons are huge. Create the option to reuse inside. You can just zoom in, zoom out with minus or plus. When switching select modes like vertex to edge to face mode, there is a lag that doesn't exist in 279. Oh wow, if there is, but that has to be worked on. There is when switching select mode, like control tab, like that. This. Yeah, but that's still like, that's optimization. I noticed when updating today, I have a gray line horizontally across my screen in Blender 2.0. I think it's a glitch. Yeah, there is plenty of glitches. Don't worry about that. The feature implementation part still going. I think I'm gonna open a more interesting file in the meantime. I'm gonna open the Wanderer every week by Daniel Weisted, just to have it there in the background because it's nice. What do you use to launch Blender? I use a shortcut. I use shortcuts. So I use Ubuntu GNOME, but any GNOME distribution has the keyboard, and then in the keyboard you can specify custom shortcuts. So I have Shift Super W for Blender 2.8 and then Blender 279 with another shortcut. So that way I can just I can just run open Blender like with a shortcut with only one hand, and then it opens immediately. Next, let's go to shading, solid, and let's set it to random colors. Yes, an object overlap. Nice. There you go. Just to have it as a nice background. I love this feature. Can I change icons myself? Yes, it will be possible to change your icons. What's that Blender face in the bottom left? Blender face in the bottom left. Bottom left. Oh, that one. Yeah, that was probably the icon from Blender. This one, you mean? This one. That is the logo of Blender Hoy, a community, a Spanish community. It's like Blender Today, but today in Spanish is Hoy. So after this live stream, I do it in Spanish for the Spanish community, and I use the same setup, so I mix the icons. What software do you use for editing the code quest logs? I wish I would use the Blender video sequencer. I don't. Starting the first one, I made it in KDN Live. KDN Live is a video editor, and it works pretty well on Linux. But then I used this is open source, but the one that I'm using right now is not open source, and I'm very ashamed of that. It's DaVinci Resolve. It's a proprietary video editor, but it works on Linux, so that saves me some. It has some features that I wish the Blender video sequencer had, and I wish I could just go and ask the developers, hey, can you do this and that and that, but it's just not there yet. So if I want to do my work faster, I will either have to go through the process of getting used to, again, to use the Blender video sequence editor with all these downsides and upsides, of course, and all the add-ons that are for it. So I use something else. Love the Flatty Dark theme. Wish we could have it soon. Oh, thank you. The Flatty Dark theme. I haven't released it yet. I should. I'm glad that you like it. Let's go. What's the pushback been on ditching the original Blender render engine? The Blender internal, you mean? What's the pushback? Well, basically it's I already made a live stream about that. I also made a video on it, but maybe it's not very clear. But in a nutshell, it would be that the Blender internal was outdated. It really didn't have any new features in years. It's spread all over Blender, so every time you add something new or change in Blender, you have to be thinking of Blender internal, like internally. Like developers will have to remind, oh no, but maybe I break this and I break that, and it was spread all over. It was so weird to say it was, but it was basically all over Blender. So it makes hard to improve Blender as a whole, especially with regarding render engines. So for example, the way solid mode was drawn was using as a backup, no backup, but a fallback, Blender internal. There were many textures that were used for modifiers and everything. They were using Blender internal internally. I think some of them still have, but it's just too old and it wasn't being used, and Eevee it is more promising. So 279B still has it, and it's a great engine, and I think it would still live. People will still use it because it's fantastic. They've proven to work. It's been tested for like 20 years. Of course, it's stable. You know what to expect with the Blender internal, but it's very hard to maintain it for a small team such as the Blender. So a lot of people were saying, actually the one person said, yeah, but if 3D Studio Max still has a scanline render, well, yeah, but they have Autodesk, right? They have a big company behind it to maintain it, to have people dedicated to maintain and support all their code. Or yeah, it's just easier to not easier, but it's better for the software itself to leave it aside and then grow. And the same with the game engine. Is it possible to make cursor manipulable like any other object? Not like that, but I mean, you can click on it, you can snap it with Shift S. You can snap it to surfaces, to objects, to selected, to selections. You can also, in the end panel, you can go to the panel 3D cursor, and then you can just move it around with the 3-axis. So no, you can't just grab it and move it around, but almost. I mean, if you select an object and you just do snapping to select it, then the 3D cursor will go there. So it's almost like an object, right? Hey, Master Sion said once in an interview that he would love to work with Ton and you guys together. Do you ever think about getting him into the team? I don't know. Have you ever applied, Master? I don't know. It's I would love to work on, especially with the hard ops. It's pretty cool. Are there meshes of the icons available somewhere? I think there is a repository for that, SVN repository. Please tell me what with wireframe. Still not there, but it will come, of course. You can, or in a better shape. But wireframes is part of the what is going to be drawn on top, like an overlay of the mode itself. Does it make sense to have active tool border select and right click regular selection? it feels like right click select should also be configurable. Yeah, but I think you can change that from the key map, right? What if I want to show the manipulators all the time while using other tools in the panel like 279? Can't do that right now. No, the option is not it's not set here, but yes, you will. What are you drinking? I'm drinking a beer. It's an IPA. Where is the smooth flat option? It's not there yet. You can find it still in the menus, but it's not shown in the tool. Can you hide tool buttons you don't use very often? Not for the time being, but eventually with the Blender 101 project, editing your UI will be much easier. Will the other icons be updated to the same style, plus need some revisions, in my honest opinion? Yes and no. For the time being, not every icon is going to be updated, but yeah, the other ones, they're there, they're not broken. So if they're not broken, they of course, yeah, they need to be updated, but that's a huge task force. Let's see first how it goes with these icons and then improve on the other ones. I'm more of a fan of like flat pictogram like icons. I don't know if I have, no, I didn't install, but if you look like I know we're not supposed to share other softwares screenshots, but Godot has a very well, but that's open source. Maybe that counts. I really like the very simple icons they have. No, let's tools. It's not a tool. I just want the larger size. Okay, there you go. Just want to show some of the icons they have that I should install it. It's like 20 megabytes. There you go. So I really like how they keep it super simple, and also they use color codes for the different types of nodes. So it's just very clear, I think, and it's just one flat color. It's not like a mix of colors unless it makes sense, and it's just very clear. Maybe it's not you don't learn exactly at a glance what it does, but some of them they do, and it's very nice. I think the Godot team has done a great job in terms of UI interface and usage, and keeping it simple but still having complexity. Will we have a denoiser separate process from rendering the image? No, not that I know. Inset is a tool. Yes, it is a tool. Can we have active tool on right click and have select on left click? That should be possible with a key map. When I'm using the feature and edit mesh, I feel like missing like transform tools on viewport 3D. What do you mean? You have those tools. Let's like GRS. Oh, the manipulator, maybe this one. Today I saw one that had the transform here, this one, like this, for example. You can hide it or not hide it. Let's see. Is better support for 6? No, not that I know. Could we add feature for more accuracy in value sliding? Now shift slide, but it would be nice to have control shift. Oh, like being able to edit more precisely. Well, control actually moves every 10, control shift every 1000, every 100, and then with alt, I don't know, but yeah, control goes every 100. That depends on the step size, I think, of the widget itself. By the way, I don't know if you notice now, but 1%, like when objects are now in 1%, the size is actually 1%. So now it's more precise. Before you can tell with other there was a few, like if you were in 0, okay, there you go. I need to add it, there you go. So we're in 0, there was always like a bit of, just always a bit extra, and now it's actually more precise. It was a fix actually by the lie. You're doing great work, love you guys. Okay, I will pass it to the developers. Any chance of add a user preference option so that I left click to activate, click again to complete? I think that will depend on the tool itself. Yeah, I think that's something for the tool itself to know, because sometimes you want to click to complete, but not always. Depends, because otherwise you lose speed. What about the all blend files that creating in 2.79 will work fine inside 2.8? Nope. The changes, some of the changes, this is not for every file. Maybe some files will open fine, but if you have some specific settings, or like the layers will be converted to collections, but not all, there will be differences. Don't expect your 279 files, all of them, to work in 2.8. Some of them, most of them will work, but there might be some things. The conversions, like the screens to workspaces, yes, but yeah, don't. Most of them will, but don't keep your hopes. I mean, on the other hand, the Spring team, the people working at the Blender Institute right now making an open movie, it's working with 279. So those files have to work in 2.8. So there will be a big chance that they will. That not only because of that, because of everyone else, but just in case, some things cannot be converted, unfortunately. Will it be possible to remove buttons you don't use often? I already replied. Can node-based compositing work with EV output? Compositing with EV output? Yeah, of course, definitely. EV images are just images. Let's see. Also, have you heard of OFX, real-time plugin API? No. A lot of add-ons require a lot of space for options, and they will not fit on the top bar. What is the answer of the FSBF for this? They will be popovers. They will be converted. So no matter. Oh, that was a crash. Good that I have a shortcut now to open Blender. That also crashed. Let's run it here. Okay, that didn't crash. There's plenty of room up here for all the tools that can be added for any add-on. And this, as I was talking before, there could be like a drop down where it would be the equivalent to the tabs, but any add-on could have their own. So it would like a drop down like this, maybe, for example, that will show, I don't know, you can enable you select the add-on there, and the add-on could fill the whole toolbar with buttons, just like they do now. It's just different. The scale gauge is a nice new widget. Can you click through the transparent toolbar to select an object in the 3D view? Not that well, we can test this. Basically, yeah, you can. Yes, you can. How do I box the select if I set as active tool in 2.8? Well, if you have multiple, then with middle click or not. So like this. Yeah, that has to be worked on. Let's see. Popover toolshelf replacement. Yes and no, like all the list on the tops. Ideally, for example, if you're sculpting, then you have the tools that you use the most, the brushes here, but then you can change the settings from here. So it's not, it's like a mix. What will happen to scripts that use the toolbar unusable in 2.8? No, well, they have to be updated for 2.8. And 279, now when you use some tools and add a primitive below the toolbar, will the options stop going away once they're transformed? No. Wow, this is what you mean. Like when you add a new, so when you add like a primitive, like a cube, and then you want to edit the settings, now they're up here in the last operator settings. So there you can select and choose. And for example, if you have a soft US sphere, there you can set the rings and the size. So at least now it's always in the top bar, which is great because sometimes you are in the image editor, for example, and there are many tools that you're using here that have last operator settings and they were nowhere to be found because anything you do in another editor, because the only editor with the one of the few editors with the last operator option was actually the 3D view. So if you didn't have a 3D view, you wouldn't see the last operator setting. So that wasn't really really great for workflow. Now that always it's up here on the top, it's much more useful. The same way why the mode selection is up here on the left, because if you are in another editor, then it makes if you're, for example, in the UV image editor, you can actually enter edit mode because edit mode works here, right? So if I have a mix, oops, I think this wasn't supposed to happen. There you go. I don't know exactly what did I do. It's under development. There you go. So if I'm here, I'm doing UV because I'm in the UV whatever, I can go between edit mode from here, which before it was only possible in the 3D viewport, but it shouldn't because the mode is something global in Blender. I could be painting, for example, here, texture painting. So when I paint here and I'm in paint, then I can just use the brush size, all the settings from the 3D view here makes sense, right? You don't have to be in the 3D view to change the mode like before. Well, you could, but you can't. You shouldn't. Reorder the icons. Well, with the 101 project, but it's not priority right now. Why is the text next to the icon and not under it? Where? Here. Well, because it makes sense, because that way if you put it below, then you run out of vertical space more quickly. Will the tools get more graphical tooltips? Yes. Graphical tooltips, as in like a picture on the tooltips. There is a lot of people that are asking that, and that will be awesome, especially if it could be linked with the manual. But maybe for the 101 project, will be awesome, will be amazing. If someone is out there, developer that wants to do it, and there is in rightclickselect.com, there is maybe I can search for tooltips. This one by Antonio Navarro Blaya. This is the proposal that he makes, and it's actually pretty neat. That you could do this, it would be awesome. And there is a lot of discussion going on. Panels could change the background color when you hover a mouse cursor over it. Why would them? What with wireframes? I already mentioned. Yeah, there is no wireframe yet. It's to be worked on. There's no modifiers either. It's work in progress. Oh, this already scrolled all the way. Where was I? Oh no, there's so many questions. We're already late. Here. How previous Blender add-ons will adapt this new UI scheme? They have to be updated to the new UI. Marquee selection should not be a tool you have to choose over another tool. Marquee selection. Yes, I normally do in object mode from the tool shelf. Can flat shading in overlay have added layers of shadows that itself? Flat lighting. Yeah, well, there is flat lighting, but that's that right now it's only on the workbench. Now that the markers are getting some love, will we get the ability to export and import them between files? Not that I know. No, I don't know anyone working on that. What you mean, for other people that are not updated, is that the markers, when you have a marker and you let's add a camera and you bind it to the camera, it now displays a little camera icon. That's so nice. So now you can tell which markers are actually cameras and what not. So this makes more sense, and they even highlight when you select it. Next. Is there any plan for maybe drawing widgets when using certain modifiers? Yeah, I don't know about the modifiers one, but definitely the widgets is a big part of the 101 project and Blender 2.8. And the ability to move them with the keyframes. Yes. Will particle be rewritten for 2.8 using Eevee? They can already, like Eevee can already draw hair. The problem is that we don't have a particle system working properly, but you can, like if we, is particle edit working? No, it's not working yet. You can see it, but you can't edit, right? Yeah, you can't. But it draws much better in Eevee now than it used to in Blender 2.7. I hope that you can have the option to just remove the tool icons. Yeah, just press T and you don't see it anymore. Icons are too desaturated and look dull. Yes, that is it's a test. How realistic will be the reflections be in Eevee? As realistic as you make it. It's also it's real time, right? So when using the browser, could you keep the URL bar visible? Ah, yeah, sorry, this one. I'm sorry. Do you have some focus on improving sculpting? Not for the time being, but the sculpting tools, like the interface for sculpting, like here, there are some their intentions on making it better, especially the brush system, maybe also having the brush itself go around the mesh. That will be also pretty neat. Like to have the brush take the shape of the mesh. That would be pretty nice. What is toggle edit mode setting in the top? That is a there you go. This is the last action, which basically doesn't have any extra tools, but now it's showing an empty popover that should be fixed. But basically it's showing the last operator. It's the same that used to be on the toolbar at the bottom left, but on the bottom right. Can flat lighting in overlays be rendered? Yes, like you can render an OpenGL render. The flatty dark theme is nice. Only the outliner and the timeline should have a lighter color. This one. Yeah, maybe. Will it be possible to select multiple objects in outliner without use B and the right click? Maybe that's, well, like with shift click. Let's see. If we want to make a suggestion for Eevee, separate screen space reflection from screen space reflection. Refraction from reflection. Where can we suggest that features? You can always use right click select to propose it and see if there is the community, you get support from the community, or you can just write it where you can poke the developers on Twitter, I guess, but the right click select is also the developers, some of them check it, so it's good to have support from the community this way. I think I need to answer so many still, but we are running out of time. Improvements on the particle system. Yes and no. The particle system has to be migrated over, so there will be improvements in sense of like the drawing will be much better. But the simulation system, that's like a whole other story that maybe for the code quest is too much, but afterwards. Tell me that the F6 pop-up isn't going anywhere. Well, it's in the top left, but you can, yeah, right. Yeah, there you go. Move it. F6. There you go. The F6 is still there. Eevee support video texture. Wow, I don't know. Please expand over the freestyle since it now works with any kind of render engine in Blender. Yes. NPR is a good promise addition to have. And last but not least, I'm gonna leave with a very nice new brand, super fresh, is that the Blender 2.8 Code Quest team will be expanded soon with one extra developer working here for a week at least. Is Lucas Stockner. He's a developer of cycles. Well, he's done many things in Blender, but he's done some, for example, the denoiser and other things in cycles. He has like so many patches done in Blender, and he's gonna be working on UDIM support for the Blender 2.8 Code Quest. So if Blender 2.8 has UDIM support, it's like out of nowhere, and it's gonna be awesome. It's gonna make it even more amazing. So yes, very promising what is on store for Blender 2.8. I will start closing it because otherwise I'm not gonna leave it, and in 1 hour I have to start the Spanish live stream. So thanks everyone for tuning in, for joining in this Blender Today live. It was fun to see all the new additions in Blender. What do you think? If you have any feedback, you can always drop it in code.blender.org. There is a thread there with 150 comments more or less discussing this toolbar system. I think I covered most of it. I hope it was clear that it's not there to ruin your workflow. The other way around, actually, it's there to help it. Not only I think it's gonna help the new people that are getting to Blender, beginners, but also more advanced users that use these tools, or maybe didn't even know, they didn't discover these tools that were there. I think it will open the doors and the walls and the windows and the roofs to more interesting workflows in Blender. It's still a work in progress, but make sure to leave your comments either here or in the code.blender.org blog. I think that's it for this week. We can actually just say goodbye like we are used to, with the best and the only song that goes well with everything. That is, watch out, headphone users. Yes. It's Gilles' song. Street Fighter. I will see you again next week at the same time, same place, same everything. Thank you once again, and see you next week. Until next Monday. Bye.